work on. So when I'm doing it, like if I'm gonna do like lighting like this, I feel like I kind of have an ambient light, which is blue. Whoops, blue ambient light, and then I have like here's my rocks and stuff, right? And this is very blue down here. Weird to switch back and forth, by the way, like that. So I think when I'm painting rocks, like essentially what I'm doing is I have my regular rock shape. If it's in the shadow, I'm pretty much just doing one thing, which is it's darker in the foreground. It's still the same blue, but then anything that's skyward facing, because if it's not by the direct sunlight, anything that's skyward facing is getting this little blue, this soft blue light on it, and I'm pretty much just doing that. Like I'll add some some additional lighting if I need on the edges, and I'm not doing a whole lot more than just adding a little bit of lighting wherever I need. If I want like another surface, I can carve into stuff, and I can shape these rocks however I want. Um, it's only when I have the light actually touching it, that's when I start getting things. And also, depending on what's happening, right? I might have like that red light. Maybe it's bouncing up, and so maybe I'll put some. Instead of having blue on the top, I'll have a slightly warmer color. I try, especially in that other painting I did with the rocks, I try to have like three color temperatures, or sorry, two color temperatures, but three colors. So I'll try to have like maybe a warm tone from the bounce light coming from below, and then a direct light's going to be very warm. So maybe there's some light, let's say here, if maybe light's coming from this way or something, so maybe I get some light like that. So there's some direct light, but then maybe there's some light bouncing back up. So maybe this stuff's warm because the only cool stuff's going to be the light catching this side, right? So you have your ambient light, you have your direct light, and then you have basically this could be any temperature or color. Maybe if the rock is white, it's going to pick up more environment. If it's black, it could just be dark. Doesn't really. I think this is the least important, but I like to use just like a red rock because kind of rocky material, but also it just makes it feel good in terms of you have this like blue, red, yellow. I don't know. It feels like there's a good color combination for this. So this is probably what I'll do in this scene is have my yellow lights for my direct sunlight, my blue ambient light shining down. So anything is going to just have that basic blue. That's probably what I'll do there. I don't know if that makes sense. That tends to be the way that I think about. Like, that's my go-to. Obviously, if you're just painting an ambient scene without any sunlight, right, then you may not get the bounce light, right? So then things are going to be a bit more boring, right? So if all I have is a rock here, and all I have is ambient light, you might end up just with something like this, right? Where all you have is this. You might even get very, very dark down here, almost black, because you're just not going to have as much. I would still add a little bit of light, because there's always some light scattering. You don't even have to change the temperature, really. I probably might, but I don't know. I don't really feel like I'm that great at doing materials, but I do feel like, so I would just do something like this for ambient light. Right, you can keep it super simple. Maybe I would exaggerate some of the lighting a bit more. Maybe there's some moisture or something to make the lighting ever so slightly more interesting. Um, with little more highlights where, like, as the surface turns or something. I don't know. I probably wouldn't do a whole lot more than that. I'm not much of a super render nerd. I I don't like rendering. I'm kind of lazy. But I do think in general it's good to add additional stuff. But I don't think I would add the red down here unless I had a reason to. Like I think if all you had was ambient light, you probably wouldn't get a lot of warm bounce light. You might get a little bit. If you had other things like, trees down there, you might even get some green, shining in to if you had like leaves or something, like depending on what's below it, you might get this super subtle things. If you had a sunset or something, like for example in this scene, what I'll probably do is I'll probably introduce some like purples and different warmer tones because the sky is not just blue. The sky is filled with yellows and reds and stuff. So it's gonna be a bit, in my opinion, it'll probably be a bit more interesting. There will be some different colors and stuff bouncing around into the ambient, into the shadows. So I'll probably play around with color a bit. So I'll probably do something like that. But I think in general, that's kind of how I think about lighting. I don't know. It's pretty unsophisticated, to be honest. I'm sure there's a lot more interesting stuff you can do, especially when you get into like cast shadows and maybe you want some light fall off, so you add some additional color, and then you start turning the form, and so you get all these different things. Like there's obviously a lot more you can do, but I don't really think that's super important. I think you can do quite a bit with just that, having your ambient light come down and light stuff. But yeah, I will say one of the harder things that I have is doing soft shadows on rocks where you actually get blending and light fall off, and you do sort of light turning the form. I typically try to design my rocks and stuff as very hard edges so that if you have light shining on this edge isn't going to receive any, right? Having a lot of rounded forms is hard for me. Trying to render things, and some people do this really well, especially if you do a lot of portraits. You see a lot of people. I think Cynics is extremely good at this. You see him do it all the time in his videos and stuff, where he has all these little cut shapes and blending on. One edge will be very blended. Also, what is wrong with that brush? Right. One edge will be very blended, and then the other one will be very hard, and then he'll do another edge where he'll blend this one into another thing, and he basically has all these series of hard edges and soft edges, and another hard edge, and followed by another. Like there's a lot of just interesting blending going on, and he's very aware of soft forms turning and light and stuff. That's hard for me. I feel like it doesn't happen. I guess it happens in nature, but yeah. Anyway, there's my rocks. I can just leave those as a reference if I wanted. And so as I paint on these, so like for example, this rock down here, or this floating thing, I guess it's a rock, right? This one is going to be more like this because it's totally in yeah. Yeah, no, it is super useful. And I think in general, just lighting curving forms is not something that I do that often. I feel like that's typically a thing I do in later stages of rendering, and I don't typically make it that far in my paintings. It's not like it's not like I'm painting a face where every single form change is a soft rounded form change, right? Not every, but like if you're lighting a face, you have, a light falls on the cheek. Like that is not like, yes, you can draw it very blocky, but the fact of the matter is your cheek is round, right? And so you're going to have this light fall off all the time. You can get away in environments and do like 95% of the painting without ever having to worry about painting those soft gradients. Unless you're doing like a painting like well, I mean, even last stream I think I did a little bit of it with this one, which was again very very loose painting, but like there's a little bit maybe here that I would use. I could make this a little bit soft if this is a, what do you call it, if there's light coming from this way, yeah, I can have a light fall off over the edge here, right? It's not, it can be a little softer. Also, this is basically all ambient light, so everything is soft. in fairness to myself, this whole scene is soft. So I do have, this is a pretty soft edge coming over this form, right? It's just kind of everything is soft. But again, I don't also have a lot of hard edge. So